E39 source, welcome to the video. Today doing a parking brake rebuild on both rear wheels of a 2002 E46 330xi. It's going to be the exact same process, very similar parts, if not the same parts. On pretty much any E46, E39, I'm going to go out on a limb and say E38, E53, almost up to modern day BMWs with the interior parking brake handle that you pull and it goes a bunch of clicks and generally doesn't work. It's a drum and hat idea in the back that has shoes that expand when you pull the handle. In my opinion, it's a very poor, outdated design that just isn't future-proof. It doesn't work very long and it's very difficult to get aligned right, I hear. This is my first time doing any of this. I expect it to be a miserable DIY, but I'm going to try to walk you through it as best as I can. Now, part numbers required per a 2002 E46 330xi. I would guess this is going to be the same on any E46, but I highly recommend you check real OEM for the proper part numbers. So here's the spring kit that you're going to need. I've already taken apart one side to see what kind of parts I need in there, and this is what I found. My old shoes are completely destroyed. There's a little spring on the bottom, or a bigger spring on the bottom, a smaller spring on the top. The adjustment wheel in here, these two springs that hold the actual shoes on the inside of the rear rotor, and then there's a little clamp that hooks onto the Bowden cable. So I've ordered all of those parts. I could probably reuse some of those, however they're all rusty, they're all old, and this stuff isn't that expensive. Here's the spring kit. This is going to come with all the springs you need for both sides. 34410410825. You will need quantity two of these little adjustment wheels if you're going to be doing that. That's 34416851437. Again, two of those. There's the other one. And then you likely don't need to replace these. I'm just doing it. They're not expensive. This is 34416851439. That's the parking brake expanding lock. And again, there'll be two, one on each side. And then I'm just replacing the rotor set screws with the stainless steel ECS rotor set screws. They're 6-ECS001. These will be a lot easier to get in and out over time. Then you'll need, of course, your brake shoes. There's two on each side. I believe they're all the same part number. This is from BMW, it's all OEM, 34416761292. So with all of those parts in mind, we can now get the rear of the car off the ground. This is four-wheel drive, so I'm going to leave it in gear and just stick something in front of the front wheel so it stays. But use your rear center jacking point, either your diff or there appears to be a brace back there, so we'll figure out which one of those we can use. Get some jack stands under it. Of course, before you do that, break your wheel studs free, so we'll be able to get the rear wheels off. Tools needed. Pretty much everything you've got. Bring over some tool kits. We're going to be using lots of different stuff. Different ratchets, extensions, various sockets and adapters, breaker bars, why not some shop towels, possibly a C-clamp. We're going to have to take the rear brakes apart as far as taking the rotor off the hub. So you'll need a C-clamp and maybe a rubber mallet, hammer, an S-hook to suspend your caliper, stuff like that. I've got my various array of screwdrivers, pry tools, all that kind of stuff to go ahead and get started. But there's going to be a couple different ways the brake can be adjusted, and I've already done the opposite of what you're supposed to do. When the pads are shot and it's time to replace that, you're not supposed to come in here and rip off this piece of leather like this and tighten the hell out of the two cables. These are 10mm deep well nuts. I did that. That's bad. So I'm going to back these nuts off about a third of the way to halfway, and I think this is going to be the last way we're going to adjust the cables. Both of those, you know, obviously left side, right side over here. So we need to go on the back, and there's going to be that adjustment wheel back here. So there's going to be lots of different points we're adjusting, and we'll talk about that after we get everything torn apart, the car in the air, and start off that way. The 5 wheel lugs are going to be 17mm. Use a 6-point socket. Hopefully you broke those free before you jack the car up. We're just using the jack stands here, and we use the center differential. You could also use the brace down there. So once the wheel is off the car and out of the way, we need to remove this little clip here. We've done this in our brake DIYs 20 times, but you just pry it in towards the caliper and it's going to come out like that. That's a caliper retainer clip. So put that in a dry safe location and we're done with that. Next, we're going to take the caliper off. Back here, there's going to be 2 tubular bolts. I want to say they're 7mm. Let me check my tool on that. They are 7mm. You're supposed to have dust covers on there. This car doesn't. I'm not worried about it. So you're going to need something like this. You could use an Allen key. This is just a 7mm hex head in a 3/8 drive socket. So I'm going to put that on a wrench. We're going to take those out and then wiggle the caliper off and use a S hook to clip it on the spring or something up in here. Once the caliper is suspended by the spring, something just to take the pressure off of the brake line, we're going to remove the caliper carrier. There's two 16mm bolts back here. They'll probably be pretty tight. Put a 6-point, don't use a 12, put a 6-point half drive, 3/8 if you have to on there, and then we'll remove this bracket. The rotor set screw is a 6mm Allen head, just like the guide bolts for the caliper. This thing can be a real pain in the ass sometimes. So what I like to do is stick this in here like that, hit it with a hammer, pretty big hammer a bunch of times, try to loosen that up. I've stripped these multiple times and then your rotor's stuck on the hub. It's not a pretty thing. If you've got PB Blaster, hit it as soon as you get your wheel off. That would be a good preventative step. But then when you do begin to take it off, again, hit it with the hammer and then use the palm of your hand to break it free. You don't want to use a hammer. Hit, make sure you're in reverse. Hit it something like that and it'll come out, or at least it should. Now I had this apart a few weeks ago, taking the old parts out, so this has all been pretty simple, but I used a lot of NICs on all these bolts, so I'm having a pretty good time so far today. But once that comes out, you may need to persuade your rotor a little bit with a mallet from the back or something. If you're going to reuse it, you put a piece of wood in there or a towel or something, be careful. But when you take that off, there's what's been making all my noise in there, the old clip. But that's the inside of your rotor. Clean that out a little bit because that's going to be the mating surface for your new pads. But all of the old stuff has already been taken out. So at this point, I'm going to rebuild this side. Then the other side, I'll resume filming when I know what I'm doing. On the passenger side of the car now, we have the rotor off. This is what you're going to find unless you've already taken your old equipment out, which I had on the other side. But over on this side, you can see very poor condition pads held in by these spring clips. Let me use a tool right here. So we're going to remove that. There's another one on the opposite side, 180 degrees away. At about 9 or 10, about 10 o'clock, you find the adjustment wheel. This is what we could stick something in this bolt hole here and turn it. This is just totally seized in place. I'm not even going to try to play with it. But there's that part. The smaller spring goes at 10 o'clock. The fatter spring, as well as the clip that snaps onto the Bowden cable itself, is way down here at 4 o'clock. That's just for orientation. Right now though, we're going to just remove the pads and get this whole assembly out of here and then clean the area up with the wire brush in preparation for our new parts. So we'll get some needle nose, stick it on this, and you'll see exactly how this works when you take it out. We're going to put it on this thing here, on this spring that holds the pad on, push it in as far as we can towards the center of the car, turn it counterclockwise about a quarter of a turn, and then it'll pop out. And we'll do the same thing down here at 7 o'clock. So here is the old shoe set off the hub. This was actually really easy. It was positioned, let's see, just like this. Just like that on the passenger side. So here's the fatter spring that was at 4 o'clock. Get some pliers in there, grab a hold of it, and just take it off. So you can see it's got hooks on it, and it hooks through these holes on the shoes. Once you hook off the old spring, you'll be able to open this up and slide it off the hub just like that. Now you can see how this side's put together. It's pretty much the same thing. Once you collapse that, you'll see that the smaller spring comes off the 10 o'clock position. If you do a little bit of pulling, you'll find the adjustment wheel right here, held these two together at the top. Let's note that this part, Bobby, if we can film right here, what looks like this, that sandwiches over the clip that the Bowden cable connects to. This side here, see if I can totally open that up. This side up here, I'm unable to get this piece off, is much flatter. We filmed that relationship right there. That's where the adjustment wheel is going to go. So your old pads are shot. Get rid of them. Now we can clean this all up with a wire brush, try to get all this crap off of here, and start rebuilding this. This is the clip that attaches to the Bowden cable. On the passenger side, it's at 4 o'clock. I'm going to replace it. You probably don't have to. If you take the bottom of it and pull, we'll be able to see exactly how it connects on there. So we pull and it folds open like that. Then we kind of unhook it. See this hook right here? That unhooks over the cable and then slides down on the passenger side like that. So again, it slides up and down over the cable, and if you pull it too hard, it comes apart because it's a piece of crap. But there is the Bowden cable with a little nut on it that will fit in between those prongs. Putting the new parts on is actually surprisingly simple. Pretty much rebuild what you had before, making sure that the flatter ends of the pads have this little screw if you want to rotate around. This is the primary adjustment screw. The longer skinny spring goes at the top. Again, use needle nose, started in the bottom by hand, and then up top you'll just take the needle nose, stretch it all the way up there and push it through the hole. After that, I then used these new spring clips that go in and then do a quarter turn to hold the pads onto the dust shield, I suppose that would be. And the size on that is a 5mm Allen, so it's really easy to put it in there and then just turn it a turn, counterclockwise, clockwise, doesn't matter. Like I said, clean all this up with a wire brush best as you can, maybe use some PB blaster on it. Your other spring that holds the shoes against the dust shield is down here at 7 o'clock. We already put the clip on, sandwich the other end. You'll just like the old set, which I'm looking for it now and not finding. I may have totally dismantled it. You'll lift up, pry over, let it come together on this clip, and then you're going to take your bigger spring and just like you did with the small one, start at the bottom, stretch it hard, use your muscles, push it in up here. At this point, you can now begin the process of some minor alignment. I'm not an expert at this, never done it before, but here's what's working for me so far. So clean the inside of your rotor, clean the drum of your rotor. It's this lip in here. You can use some brake clean, PB blaster, whatever you've got, and a wire brush. I didn't do a great job on this part yet, but clean all the crap out of there. It's just gonna make your brake work better and longer. Then you're gonna set it on here, how it would go, and then by hand, thread in 2 of your lug bolts just so it stays on there. Then you can turn it around. If you make sure the parking brake's off in the car. If your brake is already rubbing, it's too tight. Look at your primary adjustment wheel. Here's how this works, guys. Get a flat blade screwdriver. You can stick it through this lug hole. You may have to adjust your wheel. You can do this with your wheel and all your brakes still on the car, by the way. Shine a light in there, and you can go counterclock. You can go. You can tighten it and you can loosen it. That way is tighten and that way is loosen. When you're bringing it down on top of the spring, that's loosening it. When you're bringing it over the spring, that's tightening it. Tighten, loosen. And what that's going to do, it's going to push these apart or bring these together with this screw here. The spring will keep everything tight. Essentially do that until it just doesn't touch when the parking brake's off, and by the 3rd click it should be biting it pretty hard. Final adjustments can be made through the lug hole when the wheel's already on, or at the parking brake itself with the 10mm bolts. At this point, I'm going to move on to the other side and get it to the same place. Now on the other side, I figure I'll just walk you through it. I apologize, this is going to be a really long video, but poor lighting. It'll help. Yeah, I apologize for the poor lighting, but it should work. So this is the actual Bowden cable that's sticking out. Now on the driver's side, it's at 7 o'clock or so, maybe 8 o'clock. This is the first piece we're going to put in. It's the clip. So loosen it up like that. We'll see this hinge. That's going to go over the nut on the end of the Bowden cable. I'll do that again. So there's a nut. The hinge is going to grab onto that nut, excuse me, and then the whole thing's going to push back in there like that. So now it's kind of locked on there. If you were to go in and pull the handle right now, it would move this entire thing back, thus prying it open. So there's the first piece we're going to put on. In fact, it almost falls off, so it's okay if it does. We'll just put it back on when we're ready. Now moving on to the shoes down here. We'll get a clearer view, see where the left side's touching. It's a different gap, there goes that clip. Then the right side. The right side kind of has an oval there. That's where the adjustment wheel is going to go. So with the shoes out here, the adjustment wheel is going to notch on there. Notice this turns. We're going to tighten it all the way down to start with. We'll be able to adjust it when we're in adjusting mode. But there's the left side. Here's the other side. We'll just put it in there and turn it. So that's how one side's going to look. Why don't we go ahead and take the smaller of our 2 springs right here, and we'll put that on there. One side clips in, and then I find my needle nose, and we'll drag it over. And this is kind of hard without having leverage, but I was able to do it. So when we're ready to put this new assembly with our smaller spring like that, the adjustment wheel over here, that part right here, that's going to snap over this clamp, which I will again put on right there over the Bowden cable. Hopefully it'll stay a little bit better this time. Probably not. If you've got another person helping you, you're lucky. hold that thing in place. We're now going to open this up. You should be able to do that quite a bit, enough to get it over the hub. So we'll open it up, slide over the hub, and then it's going to snap on either side of that adjustment there. A little bit of fine tuning, and there we go. Yep, we can let go, Bobby, thank you. Over on this side, see this old piece that's part of the car. It's not something we're replacing today. That is what stops the shoes from going any further. Just like that. So now it's totally loose and floppy on here. What we're gonna do is get a flat blade, such as that, stick it in this hole and line it up with the hole in this, right here. So we'll line that up. It's going to require some moving about for sure. Move it up, line it up with the screwdriver, and we'll take our new pin, put the 5mm, I think I said it was, tool on there, put it in and give it a half turn. Do that on the bottom and then it'll stay while we adjust the rest. The adjustment process so far, anyways, isn't actually too bad. This is the wheel we're turning, just like the other side. You can align this and get a screwdriver to tighten and loosen it. So what I did, you're going to need another guy on the other side of the car. And it's biting now. Once we put the rotor on there and then thread in 2 bolts, say at this position or this position, don't put them next to each other. By the second click of the parking brake inside, it's starting to bite a little bit. By the third, it's pretty hard. By the fifth, we can't get this thing to budge. Of course, that's just trying to move studs. You put a wheel on here in a 3,500-pound car, it's probably going to move. But right now, that's what my adjustment screw looks like. Get a close-up on that. Yours will be different. You'll have different condition, rotors, pads, whatever. All this stuff's different, but that's what mine approximately look like on both sides. So what you want to do is make sure they're the same on both sides. They start to bite around 3. You don't want one tight as hell and the other one moving all over the place. Get them approximately the same. At this point, we're going to put everything back together. Rotor set screw, the caliper carrier bracket with the 16mm nuts, the caliper, the pads. Be careful of your wear sensor located on the passenger side. Then we'll bolt some wheels on this and try it. If it's too loose, too tight, we should be able to adjust it from inside the car using a 10mm deep well socket, or if we have to, we can pull the wheel stud out, align it right, so we're looking at about 2 o'clock, shove a screwdriver in there, and we can adjust the wheel from here, although that will be a lot harder by shining a light in there and trying to find it. Wrapping up the 330 parking brake job. That's been about a day. I've driven the car and adjusted it, and we actually just cleaned this thing up a little bit for the first time since I've had it. Not great, but better. Anyways, put your brakes back together, put your wheel back on, about 90 foot-pounds for the 5 studs in the wheels, lower your car back down on the ground. Obviously you'll torque it after you do that. But then you can get inside, and I'm not actually familiar with a bedding procedure for the parking brake. You might want to go, don't quote me on this, don't do it, do a little Google search. Do some work for me. Maybe go 10 miles an hour and pull your brake. Just bed the brake a little bit. Maybe not. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Leave me some comments. I gently did it for maybe 5 miles an hour to kind of bed the new shoes into the rotor drum thing. So anyways, it works really well, actually. I have yet to find an incline that the parking brake will not hold the car, and I parked on some pretty serious hills around here and it holds it just fine. Really about 3/4 of the way up is all I need to hold it. On flat ground like this, only about 4 clicks. On, again, that super steep hill, maybe 7 clicks. So further adjustments, as I mentioned the other day, play with your brake a little bit. If it's not as tight as you want it, really the adjustment thing you want, the adjustment wheel that you want to alter is back here. So you're going to have to get your car orientated the right way, pull one of these bolts out, find the wheel in there, and adjust it with a flat blade screwdriver. Some fine tuning can be done on the 2 10mm nuts, located right here under your shift boot. But after that, you should have a fully functioning parking brake, which is really nice. I would consider that I would say that it works as well as it should stock on my E46. My E39, however, is significantly weaker, and I'll just do the same thing on this car later in the fall or even in the spring, since I won't be driving it over the winter. Pretty much the same procedure. I will note that the E39, the spring clip, instead of coming out at 5 o'clock, comes out at 12 o'clock. So the whole thing is oriented a little bit differently, but it's the same procedure. In fact, there may be an extra part or two in there. Check the real OEM diagram, but that's the basics of how that works, and that's exactly how it works on an E46. So thanks for watching, good luck. Feel free to leave me comments. I am not an expert on this. I'm telling you what I know and nothing more, or at least what I think I know from doing this. But good luck and enjoy your parking brake now. You'll be able to open it up.
My bad. That wasn't me.
This side here, see if I can totally open that up. Whatever.
But what about the safe dry location?
I might leave that in.